People don't believe in democratic values anymore. People are leaning into authoritarianism. States are doing political repression. People don't believe in human rights. There is an attack on human rights across the board, not just you know in people believing human rights as a fiction or as a as a concept, but also people do not believe in things like due process anymore, not just in the US, but also here in Europe. People think that people that are activists need to be run over with their trucks, or that people that are suspected of a crime, that they need to be thrown into jail or be killed without any trial. Um, and next to that, there is also an assault on political freedoms. Obviously, activists are being attacked. Freedom of speech um, is definitely suppressed, especially when it comes to the case of Palestine. We're seeing people being persecuted politically for being against genocide. We're seeing people being persecuted for being climate activists. And we're seeing, again, tech companies influencing elections, influencing policy making through lobbying, through advocacy, but also through algorithmic suppression. So, whoop de doo. And then, of course, there's the global challenges, right? Which are challenges that are connected. They connect the local and the global continuously together because of their ability to not just surpass national boundaries, but totally devastate and transform local communities. We're seeing increases in crisis induced migration and the backlash that follows up. If you're living in Europe or you're living in the US, you know what that is, right? Where everybody's like, oh my gosh, immigrants are coming in, we hate them, they're trying to destroy our lives. Um, there's this white replacement type of fiction or conspiracy. There is an increase in humanitarian crises and local devastation, especially induced by climate change, um, where more and more crises are happening and people are struggling to be able to react to that. States are struggling to be able to react to that. Communities are totally transformed. Speaking to a friend of mine from Pakistan who had to leave her house because of the floods. I have friends from other places who also their homes were destroyed consistently. They had to change their whole life because of something that happened in a moment. And the more that climate crisis and biodiversity collapse is not addressed because of the current challenges within the international order, the more of these big crises we are going to see, and the devastation is going to be extremely costly. And of course, that leads to crisis induced migration, but it also leads to a lot of pain and a lot of death and a lot of hopelessness. And then next to that, there's an increase in financial precarity, exclusion, and financial persecution because of capitalism, of course, because of extraction, because of oppression, because of consumption driven, hyper individualistic, profit and rent seeking behavior that is leaving everybody unable to deal with their own local and even individual family home responsibilities. People can't afford rent, people can't afford public transport, they can't afford groceries, they are one paycheck away from total financial devastation. And often, especially in global south countries, people cannot even get access to banking tools because they don't have enough money. But also, people are financially persecuted. So if you say the wrong thing, or if you speak with the wrong tone, or if you advocate for the wrong topic, your job is taken away from you, you're fired, or your bank access is taken away from you. And if you live in a country where you're highly dependent on digital services, that can be um, life, yeah, it can destroy your life, life threatening. And it can destroy the lives of your family and your livelihood. And this comes again to like this idea of the chilling effect and state-led repression that is happening across the board, where people are forced into silence, people are being deported, for example, in the US, but also in Europe. Um, and above all of that, the funding for even the bare minimum of things that was normally available to counteract all of this has been cut. We see that with US aid, we see that in the Netherlands where they cut climate and human rights funding. The UK does the same thing. The EU is also kind of doing that. So what ends up happening, right, when the challenges are increased and there is a decrease in resources that are available? It's total devastation. It is meant and designed kind of to push people into a mode of crisis. So that's the bad news. And then, of course, there's the transnational realities again, right? Where it's not just this transboundary issue, but it's also that, like, these individuals are being attacked, right? There's the precarity, there's isolation and alienation, there's racialization, race wars, and discrimination that is introduced because of these um, local challenges, right? Where activists that try to fight against climate crisis or try to protect migrants, for example, in Europe, are persecuted through courts, are imprisoned or deported from the country, are left to be intimidated, or are allowed to be attacked with violence. And of course, again, the debanking aspect of it, which leads also to financial instability, exclusion, and yada, 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 yada. Woo! But what is required of us to be able to meet these challenges in a way that responds to the crises, right? And that means that we have to have a level of robustness, a level of solidarity, and a level of dynamicity. With robustness, I mean that it has to be something that withstands these continuous shocks. We are living in a period where everything is a shock. Everything is changing continuously, quick. It's going from hot and cold and hot, and that becomes very difficult for people to manage. So we need to have systems that are robust and resilient and able to withstand quick changes, and that are able to be a solace, be a place that people can run to, that people can go to when they cannot expect anything from the state, when their normal ways of making ends meet cannot be met anymore. And we need to have this solidarity, because today it might be them, but tomorrow it might be us. So creating a level and an ethic of solidarity allows us to be able to withstand the shocks of time, the shocks of injustice, the shocks of repression and climate crisis. And of course, dynamicity, where we need to have things that can be responsive and deployed quickly, and in order to be able to rise to the occasion when there is a crisis. What happens when there is a war? What happens when people have to migrate? What happens when tomorrow there's an earthquake? Do we have the ability to deploy things quickly enough to be able to get help on the ground? And if not, how can we develop that? And so this comes to the question, how can we be the bridge, right? How do we need to build infrastructure that meets the needs of the people, and not just, oh my gosh, yeah, we need to build for the classic Web3 memes, right? Yeah, we need to build for adoption, etc., etc. Well, what does that really mean, right? It's not about just building something to build something for financial services, but it's to build something that is not just what people want, but what people would need in the age of instability. And we need to be able to deploy and mobilize this technology through crises. We need to be able to provide the technical avenues needed to bypass repressive regimes, to bypass um, attacks on the finances, especially of people that are pushing on the front lines. And we need to onboard communities, activists, and leaders that are able to bring their communities with them in order for us to provide or help them co-create, actual resources that make a difference and allow people to organize for their own livelihood, for the protection of the communities, in spite of or despite the state. So this is the challenge that we're facing right now, y'all. And basically, this is kind of the big question that I have for all of you: is how can we be the bridge? Who do we have to look towards? How do we bring people on board all of this and get people to look at the mission that we need and build the right things that make the difference? I think Breadchain is already doing a lot of this type of stuff, right? Where, for example, for the genocide, there was like this fundraising round that was done to kind of help fund the people on the ground through crypto. This is a way of deploying and mobilizing technology and resources in the midst of a crisis. How can we expand that and what are your thoughts on not just the state of the world, but how do we respond to it? Thank you. The floor is open for everyone. Like I feel there's probably a lot of thoughts. I've been yapping for like 20 to 30 minutes. So um, all of you are silent and the chat is silent. So I hope it was insightful and helpful. Comments, likes, shares, hate. Not everybody all at once. Hey!
Hi. Sorry, my mic died. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Uh, I mean, I found it pretty. I feel like it aligned with my values at least, and that's what one of the reasons that I decided to join Breadchain, because I felt there's a lot of alignment issues in the Web3 and blockchain industry for me at least, and I was always kind of scared, not scared, but wasn't really able to feel like there was a community that can house me in this space, and being able to find, I don't know if I like exactly the leftist term, but you know, a left leaning and in a lot of senses a safer space that I can build and cooperate on building technology that can actually align with people and tend to people and actual needs. I feel that is important for me, and that is one of the reasons that, the biggest reasons that I decided to contribute.
Clear, clear. Do you feel that um that we have what we need to be able to rise to the occasion when there is a crisis?
I mean, I wouldn't say so. I don't feel like we have the capacity, to an extent, like to help in that large of an extent for like crises like Palestine or similar genocides that are happening throughout the world. But we need to do this work to build the infrastructure so that we can at some point get to that, and that, as you said, organize something like that outside of the state and outside of state control where possible, at least.
I think I think that's a good point. Um, I'm also curious, right? In which measure can we collaborate on a local level, right, with states, whether that's local governments, in order to create some type of interactions that allow us to, you know, gain the trust of the people that we want to reach. Welcome, Trish. Thank you for being here. I think the challenge, right, that we're facing right now is, of course, that um, resources everywhere are under attack. Resources for doing a lot of good things are very much in flux, in a state of flux, and that means that we have to create the tools that allow communities to be able to manage their own resources in such a way that they are able to withstand shocks, extraneous shocks, but also shocks within their own community, right? What ends up happening if a racist leader um, gets elected, right? Like, who are the communities at risk? And do we have the research and the resources and the understanding and the flexibility and adaptability needed to withstand that or not? And if we don't, right, what are the steps that we need to take to get there? And so I'm curious to hear from every one of you or anyone that feels like sharing. What are the steps that we need to take in order for us to build infrastructure or digital tools that provide robust, dynamic, and adaptable resources for communities that are at risk? That's a
I
long
think,
question.
um, like, kind of, as this is like, I guess in some part like a crypto Web3 group. I think one of the difficult parts to like contributing to like donating or helping is getting some organizations on chain in the first place, getting an address on chain that you like can actually donate to. Because and then once they once these agencies have like an address on chain, then they can be like integrated in a bunch of ways. Like for example, a friend of mine just made like a smart contract donation, smart contract thing for earthquake relief for the earthquake that just happened in Myanmar, and he made it like a fun little thing where like every donation has like a chance of getting a reward. But the toughest part was just finding an organization that had an on-chain address that he trusted as well, that was related to that on-chain address. So I think maybe just getting on-chain in the first place is like a large hurdle. And then I feel like this community probably has the skills to take it from there.
That's a good point. I mean, I honestly think that if we're willing, we can literally convince any big NGO to accept that. I don't think. I think the resources and the knowledge is there, uh, but we have to have a community that is able to kind of see that as something that we should do. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I have with crypto, especially as someone that kind of lives within these different spaces, is that a lot of crypto people are not engaged per se with like, I mean, I wouldn't say for crypto leftists because I feel like we're a very special facet slash segment, but a lot of these people are not connected to their community whatsoever, are not connected to normal institutions, um, or understand them only in a very superficial way that has actually defined most of the perspective, but the perceptions that people within these institutions have on crypto, especially when it comes to like humanitarian organizations. People see crypto as a scam. They see crypto as like an extractive model, as um, a plaything for tech bros, and they see a lot of the things that is happening not as it's something that adds value, but as just an extra layer of cost, an extra layer of annoyance. And then the challenge and the opportunity, I think the opportunity for us is for us to also be able to engage with this critique in a way that is um, positive and transformative, in a way that recognizes the grievances that they do have on with regards to the space, while simultaneously also saying, okay, but this is what we're doing, and this is why we're different, and this is what the value that it adds to your organization. I know if you get what I'm saying. I love the quote by Marv. Solidarity in practice cannot be done just behind a keyboard. We got to go out in the world and be agents of solidarity. Yeah, I mean, it costs us something, right? In the physical act of showing up, right? Like it's not just about look, like all of these things that we do are tools. They're tools that we can use to make a difference. They're tools that we can use to kind of like facilitate social change. But the change that happens is on the ground, with the people. If unions are accepting of this, if um, trade unions are connected, if teachers make use of these services, if mutual aid groups understand the added value of this, especially within the context of a repressive state, then that's something that they'll try to pursue. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's an organizer in Cleveland, and he was like, "Oh wow, this is really cool. I never knew we could do this with technology with blockchain." So there is an advocacy aspect that needs to also be pushed forward. That right now I feel a majority of people are not equipped to deal with because they don't have the right language, which is something we can learn, right? We can have the right language. We can um, pitch pitch what we're doing in a way that reaches people and not just in a way that just glorifies the technology, because a lot of people in tech are in there for the tech. They're like, oh yeah, this tech is cool, but it's like someone that is super interested in like cheese wheel rinds, explaining to like their mother that they love that, and this type of cheese has like the most crumbliest rind, and this type of cheese is harder. Like nobody cares, right? And it's not that we don't like it. We like what we do because we think it's cool, but also we need to invite people within this space. It has to be a welcoming space for people to enter without it being such a high barrier of entry, which is what we do have right now. Where okay, fine, like how can we do that in a way that is decentralized, but also how can we do that in a way that is delegated? Maybe if we onboard some people, they'll be able to help bring or be a representative for somebody else. It's not like my grandmother was never good in online banking, right? But maybe someone around her is. So you don't always have to bring everybody on board, but you have to have the right nodes. You have to have the right representatives, the right people that can liaison with maybe the technology. Obviously, right? Like we would want everybody to have their own thing, right? Because I think the whole idea of a lot of this crypto, especially crypto leftists, is like the sovereignty, right? Where every individual can delegate for themselves. Every individual has full transparency, but in reality, nobody does. Nobody has the time. Um, so how can we bring it as close to home as possible?
I Can I speak? Sorry, can you
Yes,
hear me?
please, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here. I'm glad I need to pay attention to the times more, so I'm sorry I'm late. I kind of maybe have more questions slash suggestions because even there's a lot of things I don't understand, but problems that I feel a sense of urgency to get people on because I feel like a lot of people are about to be deplatformed. I'm in the United States, so I'm just going to preface it with that. I think a lot of people we follow are about to be deplatformed, and I want to, I have felt, since October, since Palestine or this last round of Palestine, this like urgency to at least get people on socials as a backup, like a place where they can go when they do get deplatformed. So there's that. And I don't particularly have a whole lot of confidence in Warpcast. Farcaster is a protocol. People are building apps on top of it, but um, Dan has said, on Twitter before, he was like a fan of banning TikTok, that kind of a thing. So I'm a little nervous about that and thinking about kind of another platform on the protocol where journalists, you can start building it now where it's kind of more of like a backup place where people can go to follow like journalists and activists and that kind of a thing. And then my other hang up is, I was giving to a lot of GoFundMe's and crypto, right? It's so useful to that. But I still don't really understand how people offboard their crypto in, you know, how do they get the cash? How are like networks are people doing that kind of in mutual aid groups, kind of with cash? Like, how are people handling that when they really can't run it through a bank at all? And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I'm wondering if it is a problem and what the solutions are, if so.
I think a lot of our team members have a lot of experience with that actually. I mean, so right now we're working a lot with Gnosis, and so there's like this Gnosis card that you can use. Um, where I'm from, for example, I'm from Curacao. I don't live there anymore, but there's even like crypto ATMs that you can go to, and you can just like turn that into cash, which is can be problematic, but it's a way of doing that. There's gift cards. There's you can use centralized exchanges. So there's a lot of ways of doing that. Some people even buy it. I think back in the day, I'm not sure if that's the case anymore. But Binance used to have this peer-to-peer exchange where you could literally um, pay someone else to take your crypto, or take, someone would pay you to give them their crypto. So there's a lot of ways of moving forward that don't always just require the traditional bank route. And even some organizations and companies even accept crypto, so you would be able to kind of um, turn that into cash in a way that is kind of, you know, what would they say, like in Dutch they would say an omweg, so some another route, like you'd be able to take another route. So I think maybe some people from the team would be happy to help you go through that if you just put it in the chat.
That
Yes,
would
so
be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry. So I can speak about that a bit, how it works, like mainly in Romania and in Europe a lot. So there's like some banks that are not really banks, some online services that work like a bank but are not, and are like more less regulated. And yeah, if you go through an exchange like Kraken or something, and then after you use that, you go to that provider like Revolut or something, or Wise or something like that, and that works with like any kind of shop or anything, exactly like a bank. And I think that's how most of people offload like crypto in Europe. And yeah, I'm here in Romania, but like in Hungary, I know they want to ban those services like Wise and Revolut because are very popular, and people use them instead of banks because they don't have fees and they're like easier to set up. So I think that's mainly how it's done here.
Is that helpful? Is that helpful, Trish?
Oh, I couldn't unmute. I was sitting here trying to unmute and I couldn't unmute. Sorry. Yeah, that is helpful. I'm actually like I'm a little stuck myself because I just moved to a different major city after living in Los Angeles for a long time. So I was really connected in Los Angeles and not particularly connected here. So that's tricky. And I know that there are ATMs, but I never see them. But I think that I don't know. I feel like that's kind of an issue, but I could be wrong. And then same with, you know, just getting information out uncensored, and a hub where we know people can go. Because like I've been looking for that this whole time, but every single one of the platforms has a problem.
Yeah.
You know, there's like issues. And so I'm just thinking ahead when shit hits the fan. And what's really frustrating for me is talking about it with people who don't want to touch it because their communities will cancel them. And it's like
Yeah.
you can kind of see what's coming. And I don't think I'm good at communicating that because I'm just the sense of urgency comes through too much and it freaks people out maybe. But those are the things I'm thinking about.
I hear you. I hear you. So maybe in the presentation that I gave before, I also kind of spoke a bit about this debanking that is happening, right? Where people are, especially when it comes to the Palestinian genocide, right? The genocide that is being committed on them. Um, Speaking up on that, especially in the context of the U.S., Germany, the U.K., the Netherlands, I would say Canada and Australia also a bit. Um, is devastating to your career. It's devastating to like your freedom. Like people are being deported, like in the US, people are being deported in Germany. In Germany, I think the courts stopped it, but it's still it's deeply troubling, and in the financial persecution that is happening right now, especially when it comes to canceling people's contracts, people being fired from their jobs. I think that happened here in the Netherlands too. And then the courts had to reverse that. So it's real. It's very real, and like having like something like crypto as like a way of bypassing all of that is one of the big, I think one of the big opportunities, but also the big needs for communities at the front lines right now, especially in the global south, where their lives are even more at risk because of violence. So I hear you. I hear you completely. I think it is something that is very urgent. I mean, there's communities like you can use things like Signal. For most part, you can kind of still reach out and find people in different communities online, but even that might be under attack sooner, very soon. So it's a good point that you bring up. How can we build the infrastructure that we need to protect us, or to protect us, to provide avenues of growth, avenues of resilience in the midst of a collapse?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know there's Signal. I don't know. It's hard. You have your following, right? And then you get deplatformed. Like I have a hard time going into Telegram and all of that and following. So kind of having a hub. And I don't know, maybe maybe somebody in here knows that the other applications on Farcaster protocol, maybe are kind of making promises not to do that. But I definitely don't trust Dan for that on Workcast. That's kind of anyway.
You can also check the Fediverse, like Mastodon or other instances.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It is mildly complicated in the start, I would say, but I wouldn't say it's that complicated. Like it's just different servers that you can consider as different social media instances that all communicate with each other. But after that, it's just basically at this point there is a replacement for any major social media app that exists in a corporate standard. So yeah, maybe you can take a look at that as well. It's not
Thanks for that.
completely crypto related, but it is an alternative.
And we can always still host our own websites, right? Like we can still have our own servers. Um, so like, and I think it's actually a good thing if we have more people start having their own websites, because I feel like the reality of the internet today has been captured by like 5, 6 social media services, and it's totally incomparable to what the internet was 10 to 15 years ago, right? Where there was such a variety. People had RSS feeds and stuff like that. And now everybody's just like going from Instagram to LinkedIn to Twitter to Facebook to TikTok. And yeah, that's it's a clear risk, and that's what I was talking about in the presentation about techno feudalism, right? Where they want to be the gatekeepers and the rentiers, right, of everything, which makes it easier to manipulate, easier to dominate, but also easier to persecute you and to compel you to silence because of their ability to dominate and control your your livelihood, your ability to speak.
Yeah. I mean, this might just be me. I really like the idea of a place where, like websites for sure, hosting own servers, but making sure that everybody is kind of staying together is important. There were just some protests here a couple weeks ago, and like it was all old people. It was like no young people. And I think that, there's a lot of reasons for that, but some of that is they just didn't get the message. They didn't get, and I feel like the platforms between like TikTok, I don't use anything on Meta, but yeah, kind of having just like a place that everybody's going to be, where people know they're not going to be deplatformed, so they set up camp. Mastodon is good. I haven't been on it in a long time. I just feel like it was complicated to get on. Like I'll do it, but I don't know.
Yeah, it was. Like I feel like it was.
Yeah. Anyway, I won't
Wondering
take
a
up
little
more
bit
time. Those
about
are
like
just questions I had.
I'm sorry, I
Yes.
was wondering like as you folks are engaging people around
using these alternative tools, whether that's the Fediverse or something on chain or something else. Like I work in advocacy and onboarding in Web3. So like I'm kind of familiar with engaging NGOs and other organizations like that, but I find it more challenging to talk with regular people in my community about decentralized alternatives. And like there can be a clear need, but kind of like you were saying, Trish, it's hard to communicate these giant topics in the moment without sounding like a crazy crypto bro, right? So my personal strategy is to play the long game, sort of, and to join local communities I resonate with, like my tenants union or a local labor union, folks that are active doing things I care about, and just being present and helpful, and making it clear that I do pro-social work in crypto, and that exists, but not necessarily advocating for it, but just being someone who is there, who building trust over the long term in my community, and hoping that as people get deplatformed and as the need becomes apparent, that I can be a resource to them to either get them information or help if they do want to explore those alternatives. But I'm kind of wondering how other folks approach that trust infrastructure level. Like, in order to convince somebody to use one of these alternatives, we have to have some level of trust and perceived trust through charisma, which I don't have personally, or earned trust through reputation, right? So I'm wondering kind of how other people are trying to overcome that, that skepticism barrier. A lot of that is healthy, right? Skepticism is good to an extent, but there's a lot of negative skepticism around crypto that can be a
Definitely.
barrier. How are y'all seeing that?
I really, really, really love that you brought this forward. Such an important point, actually. I mean, anybody else want to go first? I can always go first, but um, I think so. With Collectivo, when I was working as head of impact for Collectivo, we ended up creating like a whole community, like of activists, musicians, people, policymakers, techno people, people in tech, people that work um, with agriculture, food security, farmers, and we were able to do that together because we leverage, of course, like building relationships of trust with people. We staked our own reputation. A lot of us are and we're people that are very engaged within the community that had our own reputation from before that we kind of leveraged in favor of this project. And we did a lot of community centered things, right? You connect, you do something community centered, and you also onboard people there. So kind of bringing those 2 points together, right? Saying, okay, we're gonna have a workshop on I don't know, privacy and security, and then also saying, oh, like this is also a type of um, you know new cool Web3 thing that you can also try that provides a service. So adding it on to other things that you do as an option makes people less hostile to it, but also directly confronting um, the assumptions and the presumptions that people have about crypto, debunking that, or not even debunking, but just acknowledging the reality that people see, um, that already gives them a level of trust in you because they see you as someone that is fair. If you're glorifying crypto, all they see is like crises and scams, what's the point? I always say, like 95%, 90% of the projects that people are doing are scams. Um, and that might be true or untrue. I think it's more true than untrue. But what that does is it shows that you are someone that is honest and sees reality for what it is, and that you are not sycophantic. Is that the right way to pronounce this word? Um, just a follower of like oh yeah man, like you better buy my token, bro. Like that type of energy that people are very turned off by because it's very cultish. So kind of breaking through that, and I've given presentations and had conversations even with left wing parties, like left wing political youth parties that are super anti-crypto, but I ended up giving a presentation for them, and in the end, they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is super cool! Like, let's see how we can kind of keep on collaborating with that." Um, so
What
having
was it? I'm so curious, like what points changed their minds? Like what did they get excited about?
I think, for example, what we were doing was regenerative finance. So what we were doing was a lot of this circular economy type of crypto, right? Where we would say, imagine if our currency system and our economic system was founded on ecological well-being. Um, how would an economic system like that work? Like, and then saying, okay, the magic that we have with crypto is that we can kind of code money. You know, that we can kind of code behavioral incentives and disincentivize bad behaviors within that system, and that allows us to kind of create a reality where doing good is rewarded and doing bad is punished. So instead of the whole crypto speak, I spoke about it from a pure imagination perspective. What would that look like if you had that control? When it comes to more stuff like this, what would it look like if your community has autonomy over their own currencies? I come from a community where a lot of people are saving money. They do something called circular savings. And this circular savings, they do it physically. So every person gives one individual 100, let's say $100 or 100 euros every month, and then at the end of a period, each individual gets 1,000. So let's say your turn is in 2 months, you get 1,000 after 2 months. Um, that is something that is meaningful to people because they already do it. What if we could manage that better? What if we could manage that faster? Right? This is a tool that allows you to be able to do that in a way that is more efficient, while also being transparent so that you can see that this other person has the money. All of these values that we speak of have a relation with something that is real and that touches upon people's lives. And and our goal isn't to pitch something that is generic or a pitch that we made up from ourselves, but our role is to pitch something that connects to the experiences and the needs of people that live within our community. What is it that you need? Why should we do this? Oh, maybe this might work even better. Is that clear? I mean, I think it's there's a lot of these tough conversations that we have to have um, with each other without being. We don't have to be cultish fans about anything, right? Like everything that we do, it serves a purpose. What is the purpose behind what we're doing? What are the values underlying what we're doing? What do we want to accomplish with this specific thing? Um, like, do I want to onboard people just to onboard people? No, ain't nobody got the time. But maybe if this has an added value to your life, maybe if this has an added value to your experience, especially in the now, that just might help people say, okay, let's try it out. And then you can do a little trial day. You can say like, okay, we're going to try to make something like this from scratch. Present an alternative that speaks to people's imagination and that speaks to people's hopes and the ability to dream, because what we are trying to build is something that is hopeful, right? Not just something that is to avoid the worst case scenario, which it also is for the record, but also something that allows us a level of autonomy and a level of local community-led prosperity that gives communities tools that to do things that they could not have done before. For example, if it's a saving thing, right? Like maybe all the community saving on this crypto thing might just help them to be able to fund their mutual aid work better, right? Because then we know we can kind of govern our own economic system. You can design your own economic system. That's something super cool that a lot of organizations are doing already, just not on chain. There's time banks. Those are things that work. Like time banks are where people trade time with each other for volunteer services. What if instead of that system being done in isolation, we could do that together with 3 other communities in our city, right? Like, and then we use this crypto-based Web3 based model to kind of govern it, so that we have more liquidity and more resources, and we can kind of incentivize even more positive action. Or insurances, so stuff like that. It's we're not reinventing anything. Like, what we are doing is providing tools that allow the fantasies and the dreams that a lot of people have had in the past on how solidarity should work, like how cooperation should work, right? That we allow those dreams to manifest themselves into reality by using this digital interface, the digital resources to establish that, right? So I think a DAO is just a cooperative with digital tools. Voting becomes easier, it becomes faster. You don't always have to convene a whole meeting where everybody has to come and show. It becomes quick, it becomes nimble. That's what we're trying to showcase, right? Like, what you've been doing is good. How can we accelerate it? How can we expand it? And this is specifically, right, for people that are already doing this work, right? Rather's typing. Any other points? I mean, I'm always free to like chat if you all have any more questions. Or
I feel also what is interesting with all this technology stack that we have here is that we can facilitate organization between local self-organized communities on a global level that hasn't really existed in the past outside of state control. And it is unfortunate that has been co-opted by corporations and a lot of value aligned, corporate value aligned organizations. But there is a lot that we can do with this technology, and it is a good thing that this technology is open source and is open for anyone to see. And again, unfortunately, there hasn't been much documentation or easy way to onboard people to that. But I feel that's what we can build here, a place that we can get people that have those ideas and these practices that have existed in cultures and in communities for a long times, and see how we can facilitate that and create technology that accommodate to communities that are based on the ground, and how we can organize on a global ground as well, on a global perspective.
that's the dream, right? That's the dream. And Delos was gonna say something.
No, I just did.
I mean, and there's a lot of these projects that are happening already, right? So I think that's the thing we forget. I think grassroots economics has done like a lot of good work in Kenya. Um, there's like Refi DAO doing some stuff. Like, with Collectivo, we were able to like launch a grants program that impacted people's lives, like hundreds, if not thousands, of people. So it's not that it's right now. The goal is, how do we allow this to become global? Right? This is why I use the word global in my presentation, because it's about um, you know connecting these local communities to a global ecosystem allows us to be safer, and because we are able to withstand more shocks when we are able to do things together, especially when it comes to like sharing resources, especially when it comes to mutual aid and solidarity. Because yes, there can be a crisis in one area of the world, right? But if you have a network of like 100 local communities, like collaborating, pooling resources together, think of what you can do, especially when it comes to like resolving transboundary issues and standing up for justice when others are struggling. I think if we would have like a pool, a pool of money between like 100 local communities, like every community could have a chance to, oh, we have to restore our community center. Okay, that's funded. Like the acceleration and the sovereignty that would give to local communities, um, independent of what their local governments are doing or not doing, um, is something that is incredible. You would be able to accelerate growth. You would be able to fund your own startups. You would be able to maybe pool your resources to get loans, or to create your own loaning structure without even having to have access to traditional finance. Um, and stuff like that is what cooperatives have dreamed of and have done, nationally and locally for ages. And now we have the digital infrastructure that we need to do that on a level. So it's not about the technology. It's what the technology can do, right? What the technology can make real, what it can manifest into reality, in spite of the physical barriers that we have to face. And that's how we have to communicate this stuff. Like, not everybody has to know all of the details of how everything works. But they have to know, this is kind of how it works. This is what you can do, and this is what it can mean for others and for your dreams and for your family and for your future, if we will be able to do it. Especially knowing that we are in a period of time where we are all more and more aware of the depravity and the instability and the ugliness of the current existing world order and system. And people see it for what it is. I mean, I had the opportunity, well, opportunity is a strong word, but I had the unique experience of going to the World Economic Forum in January. And I was invited as a delegate, and it was very, very peculiar, like in the sense of being able to have like access to all these so-called world leaders and, extremely rich billionaires and powerful people, but also realizing that a lot of these people are totally disconnected from reality, or they're delusional, or they're actively self-deluding themselves because they know the reality that is happening on the ground. Like something like Palestine, most, if not all of these world leaders knows it's a genocide. Like, it's not it's not controversial. Like, people know. They just have decided that their complicity and their silence and their alignment with comfort is worth more. So understanding that, right? Like that, what our leaders are doing is often based off of fear, is based off of, complacency and loyalty to a system that has rewarded them. They're afraid of losing what they have. Um, and I can remember a conversation I had in 2022, and it was with, I think, a then U.S. Congress member. I was in Brussels for this very high level, type of transatlantic cooperation and security conference. So like all of the ghouls were there, like the NATO people were there, like defense people were there. I think even the Israelis were there. It was a very, very weird place to be. And my message to them there was, guys, if you want the world to be a better place, and that's what you're all saying, in which measure are you going to deal with the fact that your actions are not aligned with your words? You say you believe in democracy, but you fight against democracy. You say you believe in, equality and human rights, but then you're continuously fighting against that, and then you give lip service to that. And these politicians would agree, but then the moment, right, that they would have to conclude it, they would enter into like this automatic modus, right, where, um they say a canned response, and they're like, no, 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 but like, the rising tide lifts up all ships, right? Where they're saying something that cancels out, um, all of the logic that they had before. And this is something, there's a word for it, and I normally use it, but I just forgot it right now. Uh, and we have to understand that there's a pathological issue, right? Like where self delusion becomes a reflex, and a large part of our global leaders, have done it for so long that it has become natural to them. And so whether they are good or bad people is irrelevant for them. It's just like, it's just what they do. And then so we need to be diligent in understanding that we need to build the solutions to create this change in the world, because these people, um, self-select. The system self-selects For complacency, the system self-selects. For sycophancy, the system self-selects. For toxic loyalty, and then yeah, when you have all of those people in a room and they've had to commit and you know kill their ego, kill their critical reasoning for so long, the moment that something is too much for them, they still can't do it, even though they know. And this is the reality of the current Western order, the current global order, where it's reached a point where everybody knows that what is happening is unacceptable, but they've committed so much bad, and they've been okay. They've allowed so much BS to happen that for what's the point of even having a red line now? That's the way that they feel. Because I've already stepped on so many bodies, might as well step on a few more. And a lot of the people that do try to do good in this system are either bullied out, or they don't get hired, or they leave because of frustration. Um, it's it's not easy. And then you go to another place, for example, like COP, where you see everybody's hopeful and trying to do good things, and then half of these people are oil lobbyists who have a drinking problem because they know that what they're doing is fucked up, or they self delude themselves into believing that they're doing a good change, even though there might still be, or they still are causing harm. Let's put it like that. And yeah, the world of international politics is extremely cynical. It's extremely cynical, and there's a lot of good people, right? Like, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who was an MEP, I think 2 weeks ago, and he's from like a new political party in the European Parliament. And then I spoke to him, and we were talking, and it was like this Gaza stuff is like existential for the future of the world, existential for like everything that we do. And I pushed back a bit on him, and then a few days later he was like, yeah, like, your conversation really stayed with me. So the political party that we're in, we decided to make a statement. And so they made a statement calling for sanctions on Israel. And so there are people that are willing to do good. There are people that are pushing the line, if you push and if you try and if you advocate. But the question is, in which measure are those the majority of people that have power? I'm not sure that I would say that they're the majority, or even a plurality. I think a lot of these people, they do the motion. They're just political animals, is what we tend to call them in the Netherlands. They just do what they have to do, because they're career people. They want to succeed. They want to be successful. They want to reach a position. They want to make it within the system. So yeah, any comments or questions, or maybe, is this interesting? I don't even know. Like,
Super
is it
interesting.
relevant?
I have no notes, just interesting.
And maybe one last anecdote. I also had like a chance to have like a, a pretty long conversation with the NATO Secretary General when I was in the World Economic Forum. And it was super spontaneous, right? So it wasn't something like I organized or like requested, because but he's the ex-prime minister of the Netherlands. And we had a conversation, and I was talking about, yeah, the future of Europe, yada yada, bullshit. But I've never met someone that is more totally disconnected from self before. Like, he is super charming, like a super charming leader. Like very, very attentive, like asks you all the questions, asks you about your life. So oozes charisma. And that's what makes him a good politician. But the lack of any self-reflection, or any vulnerability that invites conversation, that invites someone to also look at them as an individual within their own context, is missing. And when you've lived that life for so long, where you're always like politically calculating, it's about image, it's about perfection, it's about how you show up, it's about the energy that you send out, but never allow anybody to take a look inside. You've dehumanized yourself. And this dehumanization is not just something that happens with the people that they harm, but it's also with the doer. When you dehumanize another, you dehumanize yourself, because if you treat yourself like a product, whether that's a political product or a political brand, or you treat yourself as a tool to gain something, to gain power, that's how you're going to end up behaving after a period. You can have some self-awareness at the beginning, but if you've done it so much it becomes a reflex, you forget. um, and I had the opportunity yesterday, actually. Yesterday, I interviewed the founder of Follow This, and it's a Chatham House rule thing, so I won't say what specifics. Um, but what I will say was that what fascinated me so much from that conversation, um, and he works in shareholder activism. So he works with like individuals that give money to buy shares from oil companies in order for them to vote for green and renewable um, and emissions cutting cost resolutions within the shareholder meetings. So it's a very interesting and very specific approach to advocacy, in which measure it's super effective. They've passed many resolutions, not just in the Netherlands but in Europe and in the US. So they've been effective in some ways. But when the person spoke about like a lot of these directors, they speak about them as though they're just, this is just what they do. Like, it's not about their own feelings, it's not about their individuality, it's not even about their own morality. It's about, you know, what they've always done, which is put the mission and the purpose of the company above anything else. And and that's the only way you get into power. That's the only way you get into real power, because you have to be committed to that shit. Except maybe if you're royalty, right? Like that's like a but then you get indoctrinated within it. You get, like the rights are done to maintain you within this system. Like, this is who you are, this is what you do. You are part of the gang, so you better get with the picture. You better get with the program. So that this is like some insights in like the mindset of like a lot of these world leaders. And some of them are smart, right? Like, but most of them are not. Like, some of them I'm like, oh, okay, like you're knowledgeable, you know what's up. But even though you know what's up, you also know that you can't actually say the thing that you need to say. Because if you do say it, then your career is over and there's no level of impact that you will ever make anymore. Either impact or like money, access and resources. It's addictive. You want to go to these events, you want to meet these people, you want to be invited, you want to have the access. Trish is writing something. Yeah, definitely. Like, I think a lot of it is corrupting. It's corrupting not because people want to be corrupt, but because it requires you to be corrupt. It imposes corruption upon you. Um, and so that's always the difficulty, right, of our good leaders. Like, it's the system is by design. It is a corrupting system, and to even withstand that for a period it already takes ungodly strength. And that is a fundamental issue of our political systems globally, right? Because yes, we can hold our leaders accountable, and we should. Like, people should not get away with bullshit. Um, we can hold our leaders accountable. We can speak truth to power. We can vote them out of office. We can hold them to high standards. But if the mere presence of them being in these positions is already a corrupting factor, right? Then we're all just sending them out to the slaughter, right? Like, we're sending people out to be slaughtered. Hello, hello, welcome. We're having a conversation on politics, policy, international relations, and world leaders, and I'm just like, ranting about how vapid a lot of these people are right now. Oh, that's fine. Like, feel free. Like, I'm just semi-monologuing. I'm vibing off of the comments of the chat. I was saying about how these leaders are vacuous and vapid. Mm, I think if we want to get better leadership, right, we cannot expect our leaders to have to give up so much. I think that's something that a lot of people don't really think about within these spaces, right? Because there is a level of accountability, especially in leftist spaces. We're very, no, you have to do this and you have to do that, which is not bad. It's not a bad thing per se, but it isn't, it's not a fair ask. We cannot ask of individuals what we require of them. And we have a system that forces people to fail because it is an incredibly traumatizing system to get into power. Like the dehumanization, the self dehumanization that you have to be required. I mean, most of y'all have worked in corporations. It's the same there, right? Like a lot of these companies, they require you to deny your self respect, your dignity, your boundaries, your family, your community, your belief systems. Everything is required to be sacrificed for the bottom line, and the people that get to the top are the people that can do that the best, the very best. And even if they are well intentioned, because you can fake it for a while, right? But how long, right? How long? What keeps you grounded? What keeps you connected with reality? And especially when people reach to the top is an incredibly isolating place, which is why these world leaders and rich people value like spaces like the WEF or stuff like that, where they have like this inner elite type of conversation, because for one period of time they can be normal, right? They can be among people that are their peers and that kind of share that experience with them, which is fair in certain essence. In certain aspect, it's very fair. The problem becomes when they use those spaces to kind of manipulate and kind of like continue fucking over like normal people, everyday people, right? But the fact that these people are so isolated even within their own communities is, and self-isolation, right? It's often self-imposed, especially with billionaires, right? Like being a billionaire is like, yes, Delos.
I mean, isn't that the problem? Isn't that problem inherent with hierarchies? I feel maybe we are at a point that we should consider different ways of organizing, and that hierarchies at this point haven't proved to be that productive as they were supposed to be, or how it is preached by the system. So I feel creating different systems that we can organize horizontally and with free association is something that, at least with the open source movement, is something that shows that there can be productiveness there, and having all that productivity and inspiration used for causes that are aligned with our values, for solidarity or other reasons, can be more productive than just selling off ourselves for some billionaire's dream of going to Mars, or like build whatever, like, or
Can I
whatever.
respond to that one?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, like,
I think just looking at my own local city next to me, local politics. I'm friends with somebody who used to be in the city government, and this was not a very big city, like not like in the grand scheme of things, very little power. But because he wanted to be, improve his community, do all the reasons why people might run for local office, his family and his children were subjected to everybody who disagreed with his positions on stuff would rent giant LED trucks and drive them around the city talking about how horrible he was. And then his kids are young, like they're little, but old enough to be able to read. So just that sacrifice of one, having your children exposed to that, and then two, like getting used to it already changes how you view the world. I volunteered for my own city in like the mayoral race, and there I am wearing my candidate's t-shirt, and a whole bunch of people see me, and then they start like coming at me aggressively, asking their questions because they demand answers to their concerns. And I'm not a politician. And then I say to the actual politician, like, you know, like I'm representing you, like I'm wearing your shirt, like what should I do? And then he looks at me like as though I'm like, you know, that's my first day on earth, and it's just like, oh no, that's just how it is, because for him it's normal. And once you get used to it, that's just part of life. Like you go to the store and then a bunch of random people come and try to talk to you, and you have to have your personal self, that your face that you keep for your family, and then you have to be constantly on guard for everybody else, because you don't know if they're going to start recording you, or you have a bad day and you're mean to somebody. And if a non-politician does it, like, you know, everyone has a bad day and is mean to somebody, but if they do it, then all of a sudden they're like evil and it goes on YouTube. So it's all extremely dehumanizing. And in like the open source world, you get the maintainer burnout. Like, let's say you, for your own personal benefit, make a little tool, you open source it, and then next thing you know, like there's like 50 people asking you to update it. When are you going to update it? Why don't you fix your bug? Like, why is your documentation so terrible? Why isn't it accessible? And you could choose to ignore all of that, or you can say, oh, cool, people like it. Let me try to improve it for them. And maybe you do that for a while, and then inevitably you get burned out, and you sort of assume a place of leadership because it was just like a personal project that got out of hand, perhaps. Like you didn't know to put the boundary of like, no, if you want something, do it yourself. I will not help you, because that's sort of, that's like not sociable. So maybe the solution is that because of whatever reason, hierarchies will continue to exist. They are extremely efficient. But maybe the real task is to improve the general culture. Like one of the big arguments for public education is that you have so much more capable people. So like, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So that everybody has some level of vision and can take care of themselves and each other. And there's no need for like a god, like a God among men type of person that comes and makes the open source tool. Like frequently, if you're the one developer on a project, you're just expected to do everything coding wise. Like even if you say like, I have no front end skills whatsoever, and they're like, I just want you to make it look nice. But you can say like, you don't want me to do that. But the others just refuse to learn. Even if you're like, I'll spend my weekends teaching you so that I can take a vacation. They're like, no. Only you can do the magic coding. And then they just refuse to pick up the slack. So I think it's also partially like a cultural problem of accessibility. Like in like the small political sense, if cities and such invested more in their communities to have people educated in how to be in a group and talk without fighting and move forward on an initiative without fighting and trust each other and how to build trust, then we would have less of a need for that charismatic leader that's going to come save us, that messiah that people frequently look for in politicians, because their community is lacking in those skills. So I think the messiah will come for us is a side effect of not having social skills. And that's like an overused term, but it's the skills where if you see somebody has a gap in knowledge, it could be that they're never going to learn the thing. They're too old, they're too busy, there's too much going on. But in a community, maybe somebody else will, and then we can divide the resources. How do we improve our social skills so that we can distribute, we will never get all of the decisions distributed, but for some of it to be more like increased capability. And I think that was one of the big promises of public education. In many ways, it's worked. Like the person that can read is no longer like the most important person in the room. Now, everybody can read, and that has its pros and cons, obviously, but if somebody writes something down, it's not this big mystery. You can just read it yourself. You can pass knowledge along and I'll be on a piece of paper. It's not, you don't need to pay the scribe. So I guess I guess that's like my gut reaction to like the hierarchies are really, like, there's a reason why they work. They're not very resilient in some ways, but they're also very extremely effective. And I agree that we ask way too much of the people in power, even if it's like a local club, like the bowling league. If you expect the leader to do all of you're gonna, like, the person burns out, right? It's not fair, and people need to have the social skills at the small scale as well to be able to share the load. All right, that's the end of my TED Talk.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to go?
I don't even know what meeting this is. I was just like, ooh, there's people in the voice chat. I don't know why we're here. I don't know anything.
We were talking about policy, international relations, and building solidarity.
And then I took it down to the microscopic, like,
No,
all right, so
no, the
you
meeting
have
was
your book club. Who's in charge?
the presentation was over like I think like 45 minutes ago. We're just
Oh,
five,
all right. So now this is just hanging out. Okay, yeah. All right, thank you.
but it's still on theme. It's still on topic. So carry on. Anybody else want to respond? I've been yapping for like an hour and a half.
No, I think I'm just curious. I have to go pretty soon, or at least just go on listening mode. But I like, thank you very much for sending me the card. Like, maybe a list of tools. There's two things I kind of would like. Because I'm in a new community, I don't know people. It's really hard to sort of. Also, I'm taking care of an elderly parent, but that's the whole other thing. But like, just getting involved in a new space. So I kind of, one of the things I think is like missing in this space is like talking to regular people, do you know? And I have been hesitant to do it because I don't know how to onboard people safely without scaring them. I keep thinking about that, like how to really, everything that they need to do to keep safe, but also just practical tools. Because I kind of, like I said, I feel like there's just going to be a huge like wave of people being debanked and deplatformed here, and I want to know more stories I can tell and practical tools, simple tools I can use, and kind of, all these things I'm thinking about kind of ahead of time.
I feel like, I don't know if I'm reducing everything too much right now, but it sounds sometimes that it can be considered as a technological literacy problem, which I don't know if I like the term as well, to be honest. But I feel like if we can provide some source of public education as well, like how you said with writing in a technological manner, I feel like at this point in time, that should be something that people should have access to. And I feel like if that was something that we focused on as people that want to practice solidarity, it would go a long way into getting people involved.
So there's I think like an easy way, if you do like the technology, is talking about a wiki survey. Like I'll post an example. So I think the story of a survey, and we've all taken surveys, let's say Google Form, very popular. So whoever makes the survey has an immense amount of power, because even if you put, well, I'll just add a little field at the bottom, and if I didn't include something, they'll just write it in. And anyone who's completed a survey knows that if you write the thing at the bottom, it's like going into a black hole. You might as well have not, like, what's the point? Unless you're in a very small group where every single answer is like easily readable and discussed. So with the concept of a wiki survey, people, you just maybe put in, like, there's definitely a bit of a first mover advantage, but if everybody in the community that's taking the survey can add more results to the survey, then you can have a whole discussion about, like, look, I, the survey creator, just created this space for us to have an asynchronous feedback session of the thing we want to do or the responses we want to respond to. But us as a community of people taking the survey will be able to add new items to the survey and then rank choice them in however it is that the wiki survey works. And just by having that discussion, you can also talk about, and it's not really like a, one of these radically political discussions, just like a super practical of the power of the person in charge of the technology, the power of the person who made the form in the first place, and whether or not that's sort of fair from like a hierarchical point of view or however it is that fits your community. And it does help with making better decisions because perhaps the way that the survey maker thought to phrase something, they weren't an expert in it and somebody suggested a better wording. So I think that's a way to maybe flatten expertise or make the way that the go from a more hierarchical and it's efficient if you present people with three choices but it might not be the better one because you can only choose from the three sources, and if there's other options, it depends on your use case, of course, then you lose them, either because you don't know or like for whatever reason. So I think the wiki survey concept is a good way to break in, but then going back to Trisha's problem, how do you even get into one of these groups in the first place? So if you join your local bowling league and then there's a discussion of like what mascot should we adopt to put on our shirt, then you can say like, well, instead of me, I'll take charge of this, assign me the responsibility, but then I want you guys to come with your thoughts on my wiki survey as opposed to me making the decisions of, this limited set of potential mascots, and then you guys will pick from it. So I guess it's a tool that I've used a lot, and I've also explained why I don't like the more like firm type of survey because I'm not the expert, right? We are going to use the non-hierarchical hive mind to make the best decision about what movie we're going to watch. And sometimes you watch a movie that you might have not expected to watch, or it's the one from the original seed items that you put on the survey. I'm very passionate about the wiki survey. It's very stupid, but I really like it as an example.
Thank you for sharing that, actually. Super interesting.
I wish I could emote in here. Thank you for that.
You can. There's reactions.
There
I
are?
think she's on the phone. It might be on the phone. It's very confusing.
Yeah, I'm on the phone. Always.
Ooh, rocket, yay. Fire, yay. Token, yay. But I think this aspect also, I mean, decentralization and eliminating some hierarchies definitely works when they don't need to be there. I think it's also a matter of empowering all individuals to be leaders in their own right? That everybody is a leader, has the ability to show leadership. It's not just about like, sometimes I'll lead, sometimes you'll follow, sometimes you'll lead, sometimes I'll follow. I think it's also about that we enable and give people the freedom to show initiative, but also that we because I don't feel like, do you consider, do all of you consider that leadership, that when someone leads, that isn't inherently a hierarchical system? If someone takes a lead of something, is that an implied hierarchy? Maybe to Delos.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. As long as there's free association, I think that different relationships between humans can exist. And I don't think there's like something wrong to that. I feel that it gets a bit weird when we get to leadership in a bigger scale that I think leads to hierarchies and that leads to bad effects coming. So I don't think leadership is a problem. No. Or hierarchical.
When you say free association, can you elaborate or expand a bit on that? I'm
I
curious.
feel that if all the people that are involved in this group, that exists some leader or some person that takes initiative and people are willing to follow or in some way be delegated work or whatever, and they are all okay with that structure, then that's what I mean free association. That no one is being forced to do something or put to do something without their consent, let's say.
Do we owe each other something?
Owe each other?
Yes.
You can say that. For me, I would maybe like to take out the owing value to something or the capitalist value to someone, you know. But I feel, yes, of course, we own to our community a lot of stuff, I guess, for a lot of functions that they provide to us. And be that respect or some contribution or any other way of, like we can decide. Or even money, like whatever. I guess, yes, I think we owe to each other.
I think I was just curious more in the context of free association because I would say if we owe something to each other, then some things are compelled. What if we break our promise, right? Not even a philosophical point per se, but what happens when we don't hold ourselves to our commitments, or we decide that we don't want to follow through with this commitment anymore? Um,
I mean, I feel then there will be some faith that you lose with the community that you are part of. And I think that is something that we need to take a step back and look maybe out of the technological scope of it and just something as a human interaction of, like if you're not a part of some community or if you are not contributing to it, or if you cannot be held accountable, then, like there could be some stuff that you lose out.
Fair, fair, fair. I mean, accountability. How do we hold each other accountable when there's stakes? The stakes are real, right? Because it's. I think it's different if like the thing that you didn't do. Um, it would have been nice if you have done it, but you didn't. And I'm disappointed. But also maybe it's like you didn't do something, and then this person lost a lot. Not just economic value, but maybe like a life or like something that was very important. Um, and the thing is, how can we, when we commit ourselves to something, we commit ourselves to it in certain aspects too. That there will be consequences if we don't. That we have the freedom to choose, but we can choose again afterwards. But we do have to hold ourselves accountable for certain things.
I agree with that, for sure. And I feel community accountability is also important. I feel like in this system we have become hyper individualized, and a lot of the times, everyone feels like is the main character. And a lot of the people that are in this capitalist system may have some feelings of dissociation, whatever.
Yeah.
So I feel like we need to maybe take a step back again from this kind of technologies that we have been ingesting, hyper individualized, and that is also exaggerated at the point with AI and with this direction. So maybe take a step back and see how we can form first communities on the ground and in real life, and then how we can facilitate a network or a different kind of web that can be actually owned by these communities or by the people in that sense. But yeah, I guess like maybe that sounds too idealistic.
I mean, I think it's a good
Sounds
point.
good though.
Yeah, like and they're already there, right? Our communities are already here. Like, I mean, it's not they haven't disappeared. Some things are maybe a bit more difficult to find, but there's probably still a community center, like like in your neighborhood. There's probably still like a school that needs volunteering, a library that is heavily under resourced, um, and a lot of people that are doing cool things that are over capacity. Um, but then the question again comes to hierarchy, right? Like, in which measure is all hierarchy inherently bad? Um, would you say a child, their parent is their hierarchy in a certain aspect? Obviously, I don't think it should be, this oppressive type of overbearing, like I have total domination and control over the individual type of hierarchy, right? But um, I think it becomes more problematic when people are only ever one thing. All of us lead and all of us follow. Like, we can all be leaders and we can all be followers at the same time. I think the problem is when we're so stuck to this position of, oh, I am in power, or I have power and I have control, that we don't realize, that this is something that is temporary, um, and that it should always, we cannot hold on to it as though it is ours to use and to abuse. It is an opportunity for us to maybe make decisions that can help move things along quicker. Because I think the that's always a drawback of like a lot of these democratic things, right? Like, where everything is slower. Everything is slower. Everything takes a long time because everybody wants to discuss and beat the dead horse to death, um, which can be, it's slow. It's slow, and that's not handy when there's a crisis. That's not handy when there's urgency. So how do we balance urgency, right, with this desire for like collaborative decision making? How do we delegate in certain essence or in certain periods of time power to individuals or committees to be able to decide something to safeguard um, livelihoods or lives or be responsive to crisis? I'm curious.
Uh, so something that I wanted to say before, I think that I agree with you with like some senses being like everyone being a leader or a follower in some cases. And I feel like in that sense we should have some fluidity in those roles, because in different projects or in different organizations you might want to have a different role, and in projects or organizations that you feel more aligned, you can take a more leading role, or that one that you are more of a I don't know, someone with more knowledge that is willing to guide people and teach people maybe. So yeah, and also like you said, I feel the problem is when those structures become rigid and leadership is held because of, I don't know, some reason for 4 years or 8 years or however long, and it becomes then just a status thing. Also with parenting, now that I remembered about that, yeah, I guess I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I don't know how I feel about this, like idea of family, man, woman, child stuff. I don't know how it's called in English. But I feel like it's kind of different because, in a sense, parents, in whatever sense, maybe it is a community parenting or whatever, they are guardians in some sense. And in a lot of ways as well, now that we are on this topic, there is mistreatment on child in our society. And it is a lot of a problem of hierarchy, I would say, because a lot of people that are are in these hierarchical structures then go out and take that out on kids. And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. A lot to talk about now and a big topic to open. Sorry if I went out of topic, but yeah, I guess some thoughts on it.
No, that's really good. That's a very, very important point. I mean, they would say that children are the most mistreated, most abused, most oppressed people in our society. That's a fact. You know, children don't have a choice to do anything. And I mean, um, obviously there's reasonable, you know, there's some reasonable things to be said there, but children are literally treated as though they're not people. They're treated, especially in a lot of countries, they're treated as extensions of their parents, right? Like, oh, like they are property of their parents. You cannot do it because it's my child. I own this child. And that ownership aspect, right, um where leadership is not seen as a privilege and a responsibility. It is seen as a right, right? It's the parental rights. You know, it is my right to lead. It is my authority. It is mine to possess, and not something that is bestowed upon me as a curse. Like, I mean, the word minister, right? Like the minister, and a lot of countries use minister as like a high level position, means servant. You know, like if you are chosen to do that, like it is a level of responsibility. It is seen as something that is actually not great. Um, Leadership is, in that sense, it is something that we must hold with a carefulness that is so, it's something precious that we have to be kind of scared, you know, as a leader. Not that we have to have, sure, we have to have confidence and we have to follow, you know, like values and stuff like that. But we need to be aware that what we have is able to cause great harm if we mismanage it. And that's not what a lot of parents feel. A lot of parents feel children are a burden to them. They feel that children are theirs to command, because what they see them is as slaves. You know, as it's my slave. It is someone that I can boss around. Because even though society, you know, society bosses me around, so at least I get to go home and like, you abuse my child as like, you know, a little gift, a little something at the end of the day for like allowing myself to be traumatized by society. Like I get to traumatize someone else too. Yay! Lord have mercy.
Mhm. And what I would like to add as well is that, as well, kids in society are viewed in a bad way. For example, when you see a kid crying or hear a kid crying in the train or something, that people get annoyed, or like the looks that mothers get, or a lot of the times that people don't even respect mothers anymore to give them a seat or to help them, you know, with their car to go down the stairs or something like that. I feel like that is as well something that we need to look as a society and as a community, and we also need to, as a community, be also as a community to also hold accountable parents and to also take accountability for kids that are in our circles or cities, you know, like we should be taking care of things like that and maybe build a culture that kids are something that needs to be protected and nurtured instead of viewed as an annoyance in society.
I love the James Baldwin quote, right? The children are always ours, every single one of them, all over the globe. Um, and I think this quote is so important, right? Because like, yeah, it's the crux of a lot of discussions, right? Especially conservatives like think like, no, 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 children are their parents. Um, but every child is ours in the sense that we are all as a community responsible for their well-being, right? And so when we see like children dying in Gaza, you know, there are children that are dying. There are, and it's so important that we remember that like we advocate for a better society for all of the kids, and we've forgotten that, and because we dehumanize children in such a way, we are able to do this type of shit because children remind us of our vulnerability. Children remind us of who we were, of who we are, and of the fears that we have because they're so vulnerable. Nobody, everybody else has to protect them, but sometimes we feel that within ourselves too. And we're taught, especially I would even say as men, we're taught to extract that and break that part of ourselves and destroy it. Like we are not vulnerable, we are stoic, we are strong, we cannot make mistakes. Like this is who we are. What pains me when I see like even coverage of war and stuff like that is, oh, women and children are getting hurt, but men are people too. And I'm not saying that in a men's rights type of person, but I'm saying men have dehumanized themselves, and we've, as a society, we've dehumanized men in such a way that we've allowed ourselves to become the main oppressors, where we cannot see vulnerability in ourselves, we cannot see vulnerability in each other, and in doing so we condemn ourselves towards continuously being the oppressor and leaning into one of our worst vices, which is violence. Because if men that commit, if men can't see the value and vulnerability in other men, who else can, right? Like, and it's a it's not a normal point that people often make, because often, of course, like the women are highly abused in our society, children are the most abused, but the abuser is literally, we are indoctrinated into becoming abusers, right? Into becoming like the one that oppresses, because we, and it comes back to this argument that I was talking about politics, right? Where you dehumanize this aspect of yourself so that you cannot feel, and when you cannot feel, you start to act in accordance to that mindset. And I know for a fact that a lot of teenagers and a lot of, especially boys, they go through a period of a lot of angst, and then they bully each other into becoming manly, into being mean, into being cruel to others, into, bullying. And in that sense, they kill the child within themselves. And then so we have a society run by a system that forces and compels everybody within it to kill the child within themselves, especially those in power, which are mostly men. Right? And then so of course there's not going to be any compassion for people that are struggling. And like in this current period we're in, especially within the Trump administration, you see how they enjoy seeing others suffer. They enjoy pain being bestowed on people that are vulnerable, because it gives joy. Um, and that's like the ultimate like outcome of this dehumanization, right? Where you even forget that you yourself were dehumanized, but you relish in the abuse of others, because um yeah, they're strong, they can take it, whatever. um it's such a perversion, such a depravity. And like we see it from the bottom to the top, how kids are treated, we see it in how women are treated, um, abused because of their gender, seen as less, seen as objects, right? Seen as objects that are possessed by men, especially like in right wing circles. We see, yeah, it's not a great place. Let's put it like that. Hopefully my point was clear. Next time we'll sing and heal the world together and kind of make the world a better place. For you and for me and the entire human race. Y'all, I'm going to leave all of you. It was a pleasure. Thank you for listening. It's 11 p.m. here. It was a joy. And hopefully this presentation at the beginning was helpful. Hopefully you've learned something new. And hopefully like the discussions and the conversations inspires us to move forward into building a world that we want to live in, and that we have the energy and the courage to speak up, to take step, and to have those difficult conversations that leads to change. Very dramatic ending.
Thanks, Gilberto. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing and creating this space. Amazing.
Have a wonderful night, guys. Bye.
Have a good night.
Take care, y'all. Thanks, Unai. Appreciate you.